everybody. Welcome on this Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. My name's Eric. I will be your host today. I'm the founder and principal developer here at UserBus. Our topic today is automatically setting Blackbaud contact card emails. So this would be like if you have a new student or staff member and you want their contact card email to automatically populate. This will show us how we can do that. All right, so a couple of quick things at the beginning here. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. This is about maybe a 30-second delay, it looks like today on the chat from when it would reach me. But yeah, feel free to drop a message into the chat anytime, and I'll try to keep an eye on those. And if I don't see it, you can keep pinging me if you want. So this will be public once it's ended, but your chat messages and your presence here will not be public. So you have that extra layer of privacy. All right, so a little bit about UserBus real quick. We've been doing this since 2014 is when I started writing integrations for schools, and did this on the side a little bit from some other jobs, and went into this full time in 2022. And based here in Michigan, and we're working with schools that are all across the US. So here are some of the schools that we serve and work with, and this is just a randomly pulled list. I always say is just, no playing favorites here. No, these are, I see great schools here in the list, and yeah, these are some of the schools that we work with. So and if you're here, welcome, and if you're a new school, welcome. So back to the topic at hand: auto setting contact card emails in Blackbaud. First of all, what do I mean by auto setting contact card emails? If you saw the email, you might have understood what this was about, but the gist is this. Let's say we have a new student that comes to us, and a lot of schools will have a user provisioning process that looks a little bit like this. The new student comes, and somebody is going to look for an email for them. Let's say you're using Google. That's what we're focusing on in this particular webinar. And you're going to look out in Google. Let's say the student is Johnny Smith. So you look in Google and you say, is there an existing Johnny Smith in our school? If there is, we want to make sure that the new student gets a different email address. So for example, let's say you're using first.last@yourschool.org. Johnny Smith number 2 could get first.last.1 or first.last.2@yourschool.org, or a different email address. Different schools have different conventions. Some schools use a middle name if there's already an existing email address like this. Some will use first initial last name, and then they'll add more letters to the first initial if it's already in use in Google. So this is a step that for some schools it's automated, and for some schools somebody is going out and doing this when a new student comes to make sure they've got an email address and they don't use an existing one. Once they've got an email address, maybe you're creating the Google account, and then the step that we're focusing on in this webinar is you then set the contact card email address in Blackbaud. And by the way, let me know if there's any audio issues or any issues with anything on the screen. Just drop that in the chat. I know a couple webinars ago there was some bad echo that was from an issue in the software, so hopefully that's fixed today. But yeah, let me know how it goes. So this is these are, like I say, manual steps that someone has to do oftentimes, and some schools especially have the Google part automated. There are a few sync solutions for that, but not so much for the setting the contact card email. So somebody might at your school be doing this manually. They check for the existing email address in Google. Is there already a Johnny Smith in our school? Do they have an email address? If they do, we have to change this new student's email address to avoid a collision. Then we create the new student's Google account. And then we have to remember to put their new Google email address into their contact card in Blackbaud. And we have to also type or copy and paste that correctly, because if we don't, could be maybe a stray letter that accidentally gets typed, or how it is when you type something manually. Even if it's a copy and paste, sometimes there's a little more room for something to go wrong. Kitten on the keys type of situation. So automating this is a nice thing to be able to get this running smoothly and consistently. And that is what, if we are able to automate this, that's kind of what we can ensure here. So automation would improve consistency. We know that we always want somebody's Google email address to be their Blackbaud email in their contact card. Let's say that. And this would ensure that this happens 100% of the time. Now, some schools have this as the goal. We have our Google address in the Blackbaud primary email address field, but then when we actually review it, it's mostly happening, but sometimes it's a personal email address or something else has gone wrong there. So this automating it makes it consistent across the board. All right, it also can save time, for the registrar or for the IT department or whoever is entering these emails into the Blackbaud contact cards. And like I said, it can also improve accuracy. If there is occasionally a mistyping happening, the automation will make sure that it's the exact email address every time. All right. That concludes my slides, basically. I just wanted to show you how this worked. So the first thing I was going to show is a happy path sync, and this would be, this is a simple one. If somebody comes in, a new student, there's no student with their same name in Google. You've never had a student with this name before, and then we'll see what it does for them. So let me bring up Blackbaud here. So hopefully you can see this okay. This is a user that I created in Blackbaud, Mr. Jonagold Honeycrisp III, and Jonagold has no email address yet. We're saying this is like a new user. Okay, could be a staff member, could be a student. No email address that anybody's typed in for Jonagold yet. If we scroll down here to general information, you can see Jonagold also prefers just to be known as John. All right, so this is our sample user. Now let's look in Google here. And we've got our Google admin console up, and we can see this is a test Google environment. We've got just a handful of users, and there's no Jonagold Honeycrisp III yet, as you can see. All right, so let's walk through what would happen. So again, this is probably partly a manual. This is partly the manual process that this would automate. If we go to user bus here, this is our web portal. For those who haven't been in here before, this is where you would go to see all of your syncs with us and how they've been running, and you can run them on demand. So here's, I've set up this test school Google Workspace sync, and this is what the contact card emails are set as a part of. Let me click on this. And this is then what's going to connect to Blackbaud and going to connect to Google, and it's going to look at the emails and it's going to set that email address. All right, so the first thing I'll do here is you can run a preview, and this shows you what it would do in those systems without actually touching them. So let me click that. And yeah, and like I say, if any questions come up as I'm doing this, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll be watching the chat here and try to catch anything that comes through. So this takes a few seconds. While that's happening, I'll just show you over here in the connections tab of this sync. Here's our Blackbaud connection and our Google Workspace connection. And this is where you would go to, if I click edit here, clicking sign in would take me to the Blackbaud sign in page where I could authorize user bus to be able to connect to your Blackbaud. That's kind of how that works. All right, coming back over here, it's finished our preview. So let me click on the preview and see what it thinks it wants to do here. If I go to plan, it's telling me that it wants to do two things. It wants to update the Blackbaud user. This is Jonagold Honeycrisp's ID here. It wants to set his email to jonagold.honeycrisp at this domain. And it also wants to create a user in Google with that email address. And by the way, like we were talking about, this is configurable, so different schools do this in different ways. You might have a first initial and a last name, and UserBus can handle all those different formats, so that's totally fine. All right, so now let's take a look. And by the way, real quick, just as a proof here that this was just a preview, if I refresh, still Jonagold has no email address, and if we go back to Google and refresh here, there's still no Jonagold in Google. All right, so now let's run a live sync and see what it does. So again, this will take just a few seconds here, and what it's doing is it's looking at your Blackbaud and it's looking at your Google, and it's determining what it needs to change. Here's what's in Blackbaud, here's what's in Google, what should I do? All right, and then it's finished, and if I go back, click on it and go back to the plan tab, it should be the same plan as before, and yes it is. It wants to create that user and it wants to update the Blackbaud user. All right, so now let's go and let's take a look. If I come here to the Blackbaud user and refresh, we can see that, great, so it's set the email address, and if I go to Google and refresh, hopefully we'll see, yeah, there's the new user that's come in with that email address. And so notice here it uses the preferred name from Blackbaud, and that's optional. We can also have it use the legal name, but that can be configured too. But here we just have it using the preferred name, so it came over as John Honeycrisp. All right, so great. So that's our happy path. So now let's look what happens if there's a less happy path. Still a happy path, hopefully, because it'll hopefully work. But if there's a collision between what's in Google and what it wants to do. So to do that, first let me go back to Google here. I'm going to take Mr. Honeycrisp and delete. And don't transfer data, let's just delete the user. And so that'll delete him from Google. Take just a minute there for him to disappear from Google. And then I'll go back to the contact card, and I'm going to get rid of the email address here. Okay, we'll be back to having no email address like it's a new user again. And now I'm going to go back to Google, and hopefully if we refresh, John Honeycrisp is gone. Yes. Okay, so let's add a new user, and I'm gonna make this user with the same name and same email address. So let's say this is a user in like 2nd grade, and our John Honeycrisp is a new user who's coming into 1st grade, the new one who we're setting up in Blackbaud. So this one is only in Google right now, so I've created this user. So we've got hopefully it'll show up here, just give it a couple seconds, an existing John Honeycrisp, and then we'll go back and say, all right, now this one in Blackbaud, right, we're pretending this is a different John Honeycrisp, a very common name of John Honeycrisp, so we have 2 in our school now, but this is the new one, this is the one that needs an email address. Okay, so let's see what it does. All right, so I'm going to go back to user bus. And this time I'm just going to run without doing a preview, just for the sake of time here. Now what it should see is it looks at our Google and it says, hey, there's a jonagold.honeycrisp in Google already. And then it looks at Blackbaud and says, there's a Honeycrisp in Blackbaud. It can't know whether they're the same ones just because they have the same name, right? Because 2 students can have the same name. So all it can do is say, well, I know that this John Gold needs an email address, so I'm going to create a new one for him, and hopefully it does, and yes. So it uses this disambiguation suffix, a .1 here. And this is configurable too, right? So some schools, like if you have a first initial and a last name, some schools might want to say, my first user was J Honeycrisp at my domain. My second user with the same name, let's say J.O. Honeycrisp, using more letters from the first name. Or some schools might say, let's add a middle name. We see different schools doing it differently, and those different ways of doing it are all totally fine. We can support those. So let's see if it actually worked. So let me go back to Blackbaud, and I'll refresh here. Yes. And so we have the email address. This one was set with the .1. And then if I go back to Google, we should see we hopefully have 2 users here. Yeah, so the one we created in Google manually still has their email address that we gave them. And then the one that was created from Blackbaud, you can see there's their preferred name there, so that's one way we can tell that it's them. They have the email address that avoided the collision by adding a .1 there. All right, so we're looking good there so far. So yeah, if you have any questions on this, think of any questions you may have. There will be a time for questions. I know we're kind of speeding right through this. We're Might have some time back at the end. We'll see how it goes. But if you have any questions, there'll be some time for questions in just a minute here. And like I said, there's like a 30-second delay, so you can just drop them right in the chat as you think of them. And then when we come to the question time, I'll check the chat, and if there are any questions, we can go over those. All right. So, yeah, as you may have seen from the web portal, this is the Google Workspace sync. Okay, so this sync can do more than just set email addresses in Blackbaud. This is really for end-to-end account lifecycle management, meaning we can, when it creates this user, we can have rules for which organizational unit we want to put them in Google. We have rules for which groups we want them to be members of. We can set their initial password and say you have to change this on first login or not. Some schools have it different for grades below a certain level. They have one password that they cannot change. Some have it where if it's above that level, they have to change it. We can suspend these users if they graduate, if somebody leaves the school, and we can do updates. So this happens automatically throughout the school year. If somebody's name changes, let's say you have a typo that you corrected, it will automatically update their name in Google. If they have a role change, that means they should now be in a different org unit. It will also update them in that way. So the Blackbaud contact card email is really one piece of this, and that happens when the user is created. But if you're only if you're mainly interested in that piece, getting the emails back and forth, we can also you don't have to do group memberships or any of these. That's all configurable. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions yet. Just a couple more slides to go through. So if you do have any questions, just drop them in. We can go over it. But yeah, this is one of our syncs. Our others include the ones on this slide here. We can sync to Apple, to Parent Square, we can create certain types of groups in Google. We also have one that's not on this slide that's been popular lately is our Google Classroom Grade Sync, which syncs assignments and grades from Google Classroom back to Blackbaud. But anyway, if this is of interest, we have a Google Sync form that just goes over what your needs are, and this is on our website. There's a link in the description here that you can use to fill that out. And we could set up this Google Sync for you. We'd go over it. I would help set it up and go back and forth with, here's a preview sync, how does this look? But this would enable you to do this where it creates the email address for you in Google and then sets it in Blackbaud. So it can just kind of streamline your user provisioning process a little bit if that's something that you're interested in. So yes, there's a link in the description to that form. And let me bring, if I go to that page, you can kind of see that it's basically, ask some questions about your password format, user suspension, where you want them to go. And then at the bottom here, it says request my Google Sync. It's maybe a little misleading because it doesn't actually obligate you to do anything or sign you up for anything necessarily. It just sends us this info. And I would then be able to come back to you and start a discussion about here's what we could do to set this up and send over a quote and that kind of thing. So yeah, this is kind of the, if you wanted the whole 9 yards, this would be it. But you could also just fill in these fields with NA, and then I'm mainly interested in getting the email addresses generated and back into Blackbaud, and we can kind of limit it to that too. All right. Okay, so hopefully that'll make sense. And yeah, if you do have any questions that we don't have time for today or that you think of later, you can email me here, eric@userbus.xyz, and my cell phone number is also on the screen here. But if you go to the website, there's also a link to book Zoom meetings with me, so we could definitely talk if you have any questions that come up later. All right, thanks everybody. I know this was a bit of a quick one, and glad to see everybody here. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I'll talk to you later.